to introduce our first two speakers, and then we will proceed from there. Angela, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Manaso Iro. I'm from GIZ Kenya. I'm a policy advisor in the Alliance for Trade Facilitation Program and the Center for Entrepreneurship. So thank you very much. Welcome, Angela.
Everyone. My name is Angela Benefo, a junior technical advisor with the program support to the AFCFTA. So welcome once again to today's session. Our first speaker is Mr. Desiree Lumo, who is a senior advisor for the AFCFTA Secretariat, particularly on the trade and service component. So Mr. Desiree.
Yes, Angela, I'm here, so I can hear you. I can hear the colleagues.
Also, we'll be controlling the slides from our place, so kindly let us know when to move on to the next slide. Thank you.
So I can start now, right?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you, Angela. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning from Accra. And then I'm very happy to be part of these conversations. We are quite early here in Accra, but I was requested to share with you the issue related to the greening of the AFCFTA agreement. So can we just move to the outline, please? So thank you very much. Then in terms of outline, I presume I just have 10 minutes because when I see the agenda, we are for this session. So a very short introduction and then an update on the AFCFTA and then the question of trade and environment, as well as green side of the AFCFTA and a greener AFCFTA. So the next one, please. So just to mention in terms of introduction that when you consider AFCFTA, consider it as a piece of the cake being the Agenda 2063, so that they are complementary flagship project that also need to be considered when you want to put an AFCFTA in the context. So in terms of the AC specifically, you will note that the benefit of liberalization promoted by the AFCFTA are not just confined to employment and related impact. They effect have the potential of enhance and support a wide range of activities. Among these activities, you have the promotion of sustainable development, for instance, and the AFCFTA liberalization supports priority areas also of the African Union Agenda 2063. So it's just a piece of the cake. You have to put it in mind so that when you analyze the greening aspect of the AFCFTA, you consider all the flagship projects. The next one, please. In this regard, in terms of update, I've just shared with you, I'm sure most of you have this information, the signing of the AFCFTA in March 2018, then entering into force on the 30th May of 2019, the start of trading on 1st January 2021, and to date we still have these 54 signatories and 43 state parties now. So we are making progress towards having a full the full EU member state signing, ratifying the AFCFTA. In terms of perspective, in June, so next month, starting tomorrow, we project to conclude on trading services, phase 1, and then in September on IPR and investment. The next one, please. I also share with you the structure of the AFCFTA in terms of the admin structure, institutional structure, as well as the substantial structure, so that you have a clear look on what is the AFCFTA now? So the highest body, the highest decision body of the AFCFTA, of course, is the Assembly, which is not specifically an AFCFTA one because it's the AU Assembly. But then specifically, you have the Council of Ministers, and then under the Council of Ministers, you have the senior trade officials, and then you have the committees where we negotiate all the protocols and also follow up with the implementations. Under the committees, you have different groups like the subcommittees. We have some subcommittees in services and in goods, and then at the basis to support the technical work, to do the technical work is the AFCF Secretariat. So on the substantive part, you can see the phase one protocol that we have, protocol on goods, services, and rules of dispute settlement. And then on phase two, we have those that have already started, investment, IPR, competition policy, digital trade, and women, youth, and trade. So this is the AFCFTA as it stands now. The next one, please. In terms of trade and environment, when you want to discuss the issue and then related to the AFCFTA, first of all, you will have a look on the specific objective of the AFCFTA, and the question would be, do they really consider the environmental aspects? For instance, we have, in terms of specific objective, the liberalization, the progressive liberalization in trade services, the progressive elimination of tariff and non-tariff barriers in trading goods, the cooperation in all the phase two issues, but then you don't see in evocating those specific objectives where the environmental issues are coming in. And then you also, because when you talk about environment, then you think about climate change, degradation and desertification, water and sanitation, weather and climate services, and carbon market, and so on and so on. So this is the question you may raise. And then starting from the next slide, you can now start also to see where environment comes in the AFCFTA. So let's move to the next one. So I call this the green side of the AFCFTA as it stands now. In the preamble, of course, it's clearly stated that the member state, the state parties are conscious of the need to establish a clear, transparent, predictable, and mutually advantageous rules. This is very important because whenever you develop an agreement, there is a need of clarity, there is a need of transparency, there is a need of predictability and mutually advantageous rules. Otherwise, the state party will not adhere to this one. But then you compare it to the main objective, the overall objective in Article 3.A, which says that create a single market for goods and services facilitated by movement of person, and then enshrined in Agenda 2063. It just, here I make a stop and say, you have to consider the AFCFTA as a flagship project among flagship projects of the Agenda 2063. When you make this consideration, then you can move on the next slide, which is reaffirming the right of state part. No, please, let's stay on the previous one, please. The previous one. Yes, you can now see that in the AFCFTA, the state parties still have the right to regulate, to achieve legitimate policy objectives. So in different areas, one of those areas is the environmental one. So they have the right to do it. They can liberalize services, investment, everything, but using also this process of liberalization to address issues related to environment. And the objective in Article 3A is very clear on that. Promote and attain sustainable and inclusive socio-economic development. So these are where the AFCFTA start the journey in terms of greening the agreement. Next slide, please. You will also find some relation with environment in the goods protocol on SPS, TBT, and custom procedures. So you will have it. But in trade services, you have a more clearer one, which is the environmental services. These are services provided. These are services that can be traded among African state parties to address some services, some environmental issues in terms of services, sewage services, refuse disposal services, sanitation, and similar services. So in terms of services, yes, the services are there also in the environmental sector to be traded and to consider the environmental aspect. The next one, a green IFCFTA will be more expressed in the upcoming protocol. The first one will be the investment protocol, where you will have some provision that promotes sustainable investment, promote investment in key sector like the green, like the clean energy. In intellectual property, that will be even more expressed again with the encouragement made to state parties to protect environmental friendly invention in all fields through the patent or to any other IPR rights, creation in copyright, and particularly in GI as well. So you have a quite wide range of provisions that will be provide in the next protocol that will cover environmental aspect. In terms of services as well, you will have two elements in terms of commitment in the transport sector, whether you consider the maritime with the or the air transport or the road transport, there will be some provision there, both on the commitment that will be negotiated and the regulatory framework that will be developed to address some of those issues. In the maritime transport, the need will be to meet some requirement of developing a blue economy with low carbon production by vessel, the same with air transport, and with in terms of road services, the need will be to also contribute to the low emission of carbon by reducing the importation of second-hand cars, but moreover, to develop an automotive sector which can meet the demand of the continent as well as respond to some of these requirements of adaptation to the climate change. In terms of business services, we will have this movement of professionals, those experts on environment issues, on climate change issue, in water disaster, in risk management, we will facilitate the move of those people to also assist and build capacity from a country to another so that we have a kind of mass critique of experts who can address climate change and environmental, more generally issues. So I've just put a graph there to illustrate how this works for the air transport. In terms of liberalization, you can see that, yes, liberalization will lower the fares, will increase the frequency, will enhance competitivity, and then a more air traffic growth will be observed with increase of tourism in different parts of the continent, with increase of trade among countries, with increase of investment and productivity that will result in economic growth, job growth, and socioeconomic development. So this is one aspect that we are targeting in having some green provision in those different new protocols that we are developing. So in this regard, I think the EFCFT will be more greener than today. So, and then the last one is just to conclude, to say that the AFCFTA provide opportunities for addressing environmental issues, as I said, in those different protocols, and then the AFCFTA also reflects this in different provision in the agreement as a whole. So consider the AFCFTA in line with the sustainable agenda of the AU, and these considerations for a sustainable trade agreement are incorporated in the AFCFTA. So those are some few elements I wanted to share with you in terms of the section that have been assigned to. showing that the AFCFTA already have some element of greening the agreement, but we have more in the next protocol that are still under development. Although by the end of the day, the AFCFTA remain a pure trade agreement. I submit, Madam Moderator. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Desire, for that very elaborate presentation on the AFCFTA. I believe those who are not familiar with trade have now a clear picture of what the AFCFTA is about and the connection to sustainable trade, and more so how the AFCFTA can contribute to greening of trade in the region. So thank you very much, Mr. Desire. I'll now invite Angela to introduce the next speaker. As we continue, please note down the questions that will be presented during the Q&A. Yeah, so for now, welcome, Angela.
Hello, thank you. So I forgot to mention in the beginning, we have 2 sessions. The first part has 4 presentations. So the Q&A for the first part will be after all the 4 presentations. So kindly take note of your questions. Our second speaker is Mr. Michael Adani. He's a lecturer, research and postgraduate program coordinator at the Department of Planning and Sustainability of the University of Energy and Natural Resources in Ghana. Dr. Adani.
Thank you, Angela, and good morning from Ghana. So I'll be continuing from where the first speaker left off. The focus of my presentation will be on climate change and the AFTA, the role of regional trade in promoting low carbon development. So I'm just going to elaborate on the other aspects on how we can green the AFTA. My presentation is situated in the discourse that the AFTA should have trade objectives and not climate or environmental objectives. So as the first speaker rightly mentioned, the AFTA do not contain any provisions on climate change or environmental sustainability. But I argue that there should be a protocol on climate change and sustainable development relating to the AFTA. So now there's the outline of my presentation. Flowing from the introduction, I will highlight on climate change and African sustainable development. Please, let's go back to the outline. Let's go back to the outline. Okay. So from there, I'll discuss climate change and the AFTA and present some possible pathways for enhancing climate action through regional trade, and then I'll conclude with some few recommendations. Next slide, please. Next slide. So it is well established that Africa is the most exposed region to the adverse effect of climate change, despite contributing the least. Statistics revealed Africa still contribute some 4.7 carbon to global emissions. However, there's a devastating impact of climate change across the African continent. This includes cyclones that affected 3 million people in Mozambique, Malawi, and Zimbabwe in 2018 and 2019. Also, there are established findings that GDP exposure in African nations vulnerable to climate change is projected to grow from some $895 billion in 2018 to about 1.4 trillion in 2023. This is nearly half of the continent's GDP. And this means that the impact of climate change is going to be cross-sectoral. It's going to affect all sectors in African countries. Therefore, addressing climate change in Africa requires ambitious action across key economic systems. enhancing the phase out of coal and rapid scale up of renewables in the energy sector, scaling up sustainable food and land use systems, targeting investment to resilient energy and water infrastructure, even transport infrastructure, as well as reducing emissions from key industrial value chains. But as the African strategy on climate change clearly indicates, African countries should prioritize adaptation over mitigation. Therefore, there is the need for intentional effort to ensure that Africa's adaptive capacity to the various impacts of climate change. So like I mentioned, this presentation relies on ongoing conversations on climate change and the emerging body of research on the after and environmental sustainability to offer recommendations on how African government, development partners, and other actors can partner in achieving climate change objectives. Next slide. So impact of climate change on sub-Saharan Africa's GDP is something that is being discussed at various policy spheres, because climate change is predicted to significantly decrease Africa's GDP through as most African continents are still heavily dependent on the agricultural sector. About 60% of farmers in Africa are subsistence farmers. And most African countries also rely on resource export to boost their GDP. Therefore, this impact of climate change is going to affect countries and individuals alike. And this also will damage human health and raise new challenges relating to food and nutrition. So, assuming no major changes in the world socio-economic and technological trend, climate change may result in a 3 degrees Celsius. As we speak, the rise in temperature is somewhere little above 1 degree Celsius. So when there is a 3 degrees Celsius temperature increase, this is going to have a very severe impact on Africa's GDP by some 8.6% annually in the next 60, 70 years. So if climate change is limited to 1.5 degrees Celsius as agreed in the Paris Agreement, the decrease in GDP will be significant. So we'll have to adapt or implement some mitigation responses. Next slide. Next slide, please. So how is climate change or regional trade and climate change related? When the AFTA was adopted and eventually came to force in 2021, the stage was prepared for intra-African trade to grow by some 33%. And it is believed that this will lead to an expected 30 million people being moved from extreme poverty by 2035. This will be based on manufacturing, which is going to also double from 500 billion USD to 1 trillion by 2025. While intra-African trade in agricultural goods and products is projected to increase by some 20 to 30%. The underlying issue here that needs to be discussed is that the developed countries relied on coal and other high energy intensive sectors to drive their development. And it is expected that Africa will follow the same pathway. So this industrialization in various sectors is also going to emission in various proportions. So the increase in production in pursuit of trade opportunities under the AFTA is projected to contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. Yet this can also form a key climate change and environmental objectives. Next slide. Next slide, please.
Dr. Michael, please, you have 2 minutes left.
Yes. Okay, then let's move to the next slide because these are common. Next slide. So the AFTA is going to generate a couple of benefits. As the first presenter discussed, But benefit from the after will include the development of green value chains from climate change and environmental goods and services in Africa. Even as trade liberalization ensures that there is little or no need to develop green industries that cover all the many product lines up to 304 that exist across 10 sectors identified by the EGO or Economic Commission of Africa. The AFTA forms part of a broader green economic transition plan for Africa based on the objectives of the Paris Agreement and national continental target on climate change. Thus, decarbonization in the energy sector and in trade-related sectors such as transportation are central to the green transition under the agreement. For instance, resource-rich countries such as Algeria, Angola, Nigeria, South Africa, and Zimbabwe rely on fossil fuel, either as export receipt or for domestic power generation. Thus, the green transition to net zero emission and decarbonization will require policymakers to devise a phase-out approach over decades. And that successful green transition will further hinge on development partners, providing technical and financial support that are beyond what is currently being offered under the after. Next slide. So there is a utility in including relevant provisions in the AFTA framework to enhance the strategic link between climate change, trade, and the environment. For example, considering the determination and commitment of the Secretariat and state parties, there may be a great value in incorporating an additional climate change and environment against what people are saying that the AFTA should have clear trade objectives and not environmental objectives. Moreover, such a mechanism will anchor and harmonize the numerous multilateral, continental, regional commitment and initiatives that extensively address climate change and environmental sustainability. For instance, it will enable the implementation strategy, Africa's Green Recovery Plan, and various regional strategies on climate change that African governments are already involved. Next slide. Let's move to the conclusion, please. Let's move to the conclusion. Please, let's move to the. I presume I have a minute left. Yeah. So, Africa is the single largest market in the world in terms of numbers, the number of countries and the people involved. With a population expected to reach over 2.4 billion by 2050, Africa needs to be able to meet its demand at the same environmental volatility is high. Therefore, all hands are to be on deck and all policies are to be harmonized to promote climate resilience. And the AFTA should also be supported with accompanying measures and complementary regulatory mechanisms that link the agreement to climate change and the environment by expanding on the already negotiated annexes on sanitary and phytosanitary measures, technical barriers to trade and trade facilitation mechanisms, and introduction of a simplified and harmonized trade regimes, especially for a cross-border agriculture and renewable energy trade, should be encouraged under the AFTA. And lastly, there is the need for an intentional effort to create an enabling environment for greater cooperation among government, private sector, international development organizations, and other actors on mobilizing financial resources to implement the transition towards sustainable energy and agricultural development in Africa. Such funds can support capacity building, research and development, as well as for investment in renewable energy and improve agricultural technologies in line with the goals and objectives of the AFTA. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that very, very elaborate presentation. I believe we are building up the knowledge on trade and sustainability, especially the element of green trade. So with that presentation, I hope we are still noting down our questions. At the end of all the presentations, we'll give you a Q&A session. So I hope we are just putting down the issues that we feel need to be addressed. With that said, I wish to invite Madame Rose Rono, who is a trade policy expert. She has vast experience in international trade. She can relate issues of international trade to gender, issues of trade facilitation, anything trade, Rose is very much conversant with. So I'll raise your expectations from her presentation, but I know she's up to the task. So Madam Rose, she will also be talking about sustainability in trade. And yeah, then we'll proceed to the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Manasseh. I think a lot of people call me the CFTA lady. How many of you have seen me on LinkedIn? Yeah? Rose Rono? I'm the CFTA lady. I so strongly believe in the CFTA, and I was having a conversation with a regional integration specialist by the name of, I think, Andrew Mold. Have you heard of him? And the conversation we were having is, why is the CFTA really, really important to us? And we came to a conclusion that this is the Marshall Plan for Africa. What is the other alternative to get ourselves out of where we are in terms of, the challenges that Africa has? And for those who understand that there's a medication in Kenya called Muarubaini. Have you heard of Muarubaini? It treats 40 different diseases. And I always say that the CFTA is the medicine for every African problem that you can think of. Why? Because it advocates for self-determination, advocates for sufficiency in terms of economic development. So that's why I'm really passionate about it today. I am currently consulting for the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, assisting in terms of development of national strategies for the CFTA, specifically gender mainstreaming of those strategies. But most importantly, I'm a partner of GIZ from as far back as 2020. I have consulted with GIZ, provided capacity building project that we worked with Joyce in providing awareness and capacity building to women in the ESC on how to take advantage of the CFTA. I have also worked with Matilda in Rwanda to train Rwanda Association of Manufacturers on the CFTA rules of origin. Amongst other projects that I have done with GIZ, and I'm really grateful that GIZ is here, is a partner of Africa, to be able to not only assist technical assistance in terms of negotiation of the CFTA, but also technical assistance for the implementation of the CFTA. So today I'm just going to talk about sustainability or sustainable development in terms of implementation of CFTA strategies. My colleague, I think Desiree from Ghana, spoke about the CFTA itself being, having provisions of sustainability. And I always say that an agreement is as good as if it is implemented. So the CFTA looks very good, and we have made it look so good. We talk about it and we say it's going to transform us, but are we going to actually implement it at national levels? We've seen quite a number of agreements that we have signed as African countries, but we have not gone ahead and domesticated those agreements by putting in place implementation strategies and also supporting those implementation strategies with budgets. Because you can say, yes, I have ratified, but you don't provide a budget, what happens? The Ministry of Trade will not be able to implement it. And that's whereby we are partners as GIZ and other development partners assist governments to be able to implement CFTA strategies. So I won't talk about so much about the CFTA because you all know it's an agreement, a free trade area that promises to be able to eliminate non-tariff barriers, eliminate tariffs across 90% of all trade in Africa, and all good things that you can think, making it easier to trade amongst each other. And studies that were done by UNCTAD showed that in terms of trade amongst each other, it's around 16% African countries. But when you go to Europe, 70%. When you go to Asia, 60%, the way they trade amongst each other. So that's why I say the CFTA is really important, because if we trade amongst each other, then there are more opportunities for employment, there are more opportunities to grow our GDP. And basically, another research had it that 30 million people will be removed, out of poverty. So I don't believe that there is, a voice in the room that feels that the CFTA is not, the way to go. It is the way to go. But how do we implement it in a sustainable way? Sustainable development basically means, go back to the previous slide, basically means implementing, putting in place strategies that do not compromise future generations to meet our own needs. So whatever you do, what you put in place, you ask yourself, does it compromise the future generation? If it does, what can I be able to do to mitigate against it? Let's go to the next slide. So these are the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I'm sure most of you are aware of them. And my argument is, as countries are implementing or coming up with national implementation strategies, let us have those implementation strategies audited side by side with these sustainable development goals, of which most countries in the world have bought into it and are implementing. So looking at no poverty, are your strategies geared towards addressing, the causes of poverty in your country? Zero hunger. Food security is a really big issue. And one of the issues that we have in food security is non-tariff barriers, which prevent free movement of goods across different African countries. Secondly is also the issue of climate change, whereby there's a lot of environmental degradation that has led to, low production capacity. So a question that I ask at national strategies, have you put a strategy to increase your production capacity, to increase your, self-sufficiency? And we saw during COVID-19, whereby most African countries were net importers of food. And there was a temporary shake in terms of, availability of food. So are we putting in place regional strategies to bolster regional value chains so that we have movement across, countries in a regional economic community, free movement of food? Good health, for you to be able to achieve anything in any country, your citizens must be healthy to be able to go to work. So I always say, before you even say that I want to be able to create more employment, I want to move my GDP to this and this, they are the basics that must be covered. Food security is a basic. Good health and well-being is really a basic. For your citizenry to be able to pay those taxes that can be able to fund your economy, they need to be in good health. Quality education. I think a lot of African countries are still struggling with old regime educational systems that are geared towards employment, that are not geared towards, industrialization, entrepreneurship. For us to achieve the CFTA, then we must be able to rethink our education systems to produce human resource that will be able to assist or be able to provide the capacity to implement the CFTA. Gender equality, really, really important. And I always say that in most countries, you'll find that there are more women than men. So if you're not utilizing a bigger part of your population by providing them with the opportunities to be able to participate in the economy, gender mainstreaming the CFTA. And I just counted, because I'm a gender specialist, I just counted the number of women and men in the room, and I saw we have a really good balance. So I want us to clap for GIZ. We have a good balance, and most of the time you go to a room and you'll find that there's a panel. Have you heard of a panel? A panel is a panel that has all men. So we need to change that, and we need to be conscious of that. When you walk into a room, be conscious of it. When you're selecting, organizing an event, be conscious of it. Because even if that woman is not maybe bringing in something, just being there, she might be able to say, I have this problem. And when she speaks for who? All women. Clean water, sanitation, really important. Affordable and clean energy cannot be underestimated. I'm being told to move a bit faster. Let's go to the following slide. The next slide, I just have a few recommendations. So really important is that we lobbied enough, and we have the protocol of women and youth that has been put in place that fosters inclusivity, and that is really, really important in the CFTA. Gender mainstreaming strategies, I cannot overemphasize that. Climate change strategies need to be mainstreamed in the national implementation strategies, prioritization of strategies to address food security, education systems, clean water, encouragement of industrialization, incentivizing responsible consumption and also production, especially for industries. You find industries, really contribute to environmental degradation. So how do you ensure that they are compliant? Can you incentivize as government to be able to ensure that they are sticking to, a preservation of the environment, leveraging of opportunities in the green environment, in the blue economy? Last but not least, partnership. And the reason why we are here in this room is because of partnership, because GIZ has accepted to partner with the CFTA Secretariat, has accepted to partner with the AU, has accepted to partner with JB here, who represents the private sector, to ensure that we're able to deliver the CFTA. And just the bonus two things that I want you to think about. First of all is, I know GIZ provides technical assistance both at the negotiation level and also at the implementation at country level. I think when consultants are going out there, it's important to look at the position of countries. You find that there are some countries which are very vulnerable. 1 month ago, I was in South Sudan, and South Sudan is really weak in terms of framework. So if you go there and want to implement the CFTA just the way it is, or as a consultant propose, to implement the CFTA because they signed, then you're really building on quicksand, because there are no structures to be able to handle that, what you want to implement. So really, we need to get back and see there are a lot of fragile states in Africa. What can we be able to do to them? And most of them have ratified or signed the agreement. Somalia has done that. How do you implement? So that's a question that I want to put across in the room. You can think about it. Secondly, for the CFTA to be successful, we need to be able to put in place a monitoring and evaluation matrix, or a monitoring and evaluation framework. Do we have a policy domestication index? And I believe that's areas that we can be able to partner. You partner with government, partner with private sector, to see how partner states have been able to domesticate those policies, or domesticate what has been agreed at the CFTA level to national strategies. So thank you. That's my contribution.
Yes, thank you very much, Rose. I believe she lived up to the expectations. Yes? Yes, she was able to relate the Sustainable Development Goals to trade and to the CFTA, and even brought about the issues of gender mainstreaming, education, among others, that people really have not been successful in relating to how they contribute to trade in a sustainable manner. So thank you very much for that presentation. We'll move on swiftly to the next presenter, Mr. John Bosco Kalisa, who is the director of EABC. And I'll have to say that in my previous life, I was with the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, and we worked very closely with EABC, being the apex body of the private sector. And their contribution to issues of trade and sustainability cannot go without mention. So welcome, thank you very much for coming to this session. And I'd like to welcome you to give your presentation. Then before we move to the next session, it will be a Q&A. Thank you.
Good morning once again. Indeed, it is a pleasure and an honor from East African Business Council to share the insight on sustainable development, and also looking at the CFTA. And I want to appreciate and thank the previous speaker who elaborated how the CFTA is a game changer. And again, being a game changer, I think the number from yesterday and even today have been adequately elaborated in terms of poverty reduction, 30 million people to be lifted from extreme poverty, 68 million people to be lifted from moderate poverty. But above all, I think before I dive deeper into my presentation, the reason why CFTA is a game changer, one is that there has been a very political commitment by all the leaders. 54 countries have signed the agreement. Currently, 43 have ratified the agreement. That demonstrates a commitment from the political level. Then, apart from that, the estimation from both World Bank, UNECA, my sister Rose has highlighted, it's a game changer in the sense that it takes into consideration our regional integration agenda. There is a principle called a key principle, that CFTA is not there to replace the current regional integration communities. It is there to enhance them. It is there, currently there are 8 recognized by African Union, including EAC, COMESA, SADC, ECOWAS, ECAS, and other 8 have been recognized. So whatever we are doing, CFTA will enhance those regional economic integration agenda. And another important aspect of the CFTA, and I think yesterday I highlighted it, is the private sector. It takes into account the involvement of the private sector to drive the integration agenda. So the private sector plays a cardinal role, an important role in terms of the CFTA. So let me go to my presentation. I looked at the private sector perspective on how climate change factors in the ESC investment and trade negotiation. When we say that there is a causal relationship between trade and the environment, they support each other. They support each other in the sense that appropriate trade, when it is conducted, enhances environmental mitigation. It supports the environmental resilience. That is very critical that at the ESC level, we looked at the key sectors like agriculture, we looked at the transport sector. These are some of the sectors that are driving our development, our GDP growth, as previous speaker mentioned. Tourism, before COVID, is one of the sectors that was recording a double-digit growth. But if we are not cautiously taking into action the effect of environment on tourism, on transport, on agriculture, then those sectors will not realize the growth we want. Because the environment has an impact, a negative impact on the growth of those sectors. Be it maritime transport, be it on our one-stop border posts. So whatever we are doing, even when we are building one-stop border posts, I used to work with Trademark East Africa, we had to factor in environmental consideration in everything we are doing at the ESC. Construction sector, now to get a construction permit, you need to have environmental permit first. So I want to say that, and I want to bring to the attention of the audience here that I'm happy from the ESC perspective where we stand. Every sector, all the countries, they are taking, even the hotels, they are taking into consideration the environmental issues, environmental measures. Again, looking at the statistics, and I think it is an opportunity from our side that when you look at the statistics, our carbon emissions is less than 4%. So we are not emitting carbon compared to other developed countries, but that gives us a chance now to work on the measures to mitigate the effect of climate on the sectors that we have comparative and competitive advantage. I mentioned agriculture, tourism, infrastructure development, all takes into account the environmental issues into consideration. And I think that is the message I wanted to convey to this audience, that we are making a cautious approach, a coordinated approach on environmental related issues as we move towards the continental free trade area. I wanted to share with you maybe quickly on the what are the private sector what we have been doing. Of course, the impact, if we are not doing that, the impact is very daunting in terms of the decline in intra-regional trade, in terms of continental intra-regional trade. We need to ensure that the trade component, the trade integration, takes into consideration the environmental issue. And I know at the EAC, they have a strong strategy on how to mitigate the effect of climate change. And also most of our countries from Rwanda, they have a very strong policy on environment. Also the Kenya, Tanzania, all that, all our countries have embraced that in their development agenda. The environmental issues are taken seriously. We'll be having Commonwealth Business Forum in Kigali from 21st to 23rd. It is one of the topics that is going to be discussed. The environment, how do we preserve the environment? How do we mitigate the impact of the environment? So I wanted to quickly to perhaps maybe you can, because these have been talked about, the sector's impact, but I wanted to see what we are doing as a private sector, maybe the slide on what is being done at the private sector side. I talked about the effect on maritime transport, but maybe quickly on the so there are a number of areas that the private sector is contributing in terms of environmental sustainability and the best practices. One is that there is a new commitment to low carbon for business. All the financial institutions, both from the developed and developing world, have committed $100 billion to support the climate action plan. There has been also the rise of the green bond. Rapid growth is also some commendable efforts that is being done in terms of mitigating the climate. Then the investment portfolios, various investors have committed, they have committed funds, have made a commitment in terms of implementing the climate measures. Use of smart agriculture, that is one of also a strong measure that has been adopted. Then the reduction in the use of plastics across the region. If you travel to Kigali, if you come here, you are not used. You don't have to use the plastic because they have. It has been realized that that is one of the effects of the environment and has really a tremendous impact. So having said that, I wanted just to share again with the panelists and with the viewers today 3 important takeaways in terms of building resilience, in terms of building sustainable development, in terms of climate action plan. One is that we need to have a concerted effort, engagement between government, private sector, and civil society, and the development partners. We need to have a social contract. I remember when my sister talked about SDGs goals. When they were crafted, the private sector was left behind. And we are the beneficiaries. If you are left behind under SDGs, then they will not be implemented. So it is important that the private sector is involved in terms of policies, in terms of strategies, in terms of the negotiation. That is a very, very key. The third element is in terms of funding, climate-related action plan and resilience. There's a need to engage our development partners, our private sector and the government in terms of funding private sector, in funding the climate-related interventions. And that has been the challenge. We talk about micro and small enterprises. We talk about women. We may talk about youth. And there are those protocols. But how do we infuse that within their day-to-day activities? Because, as I mentioned yesterday, 80% of our trade in the region, and even at the continental level, it is done by women, it's done by youth. You know, I was looking at the statistics, 65% of our population are below 25 years. So they need to be supported. Now we are negotiating under CFTA e-commerce strategy. And that is where we see opportunities for the youth to gain from the employment. But how do we involve? How do we involve them? How do we engage them to understand the impact of climate change in terms of sustainable development? So engagement and sensitization, raise awareness among the youth and the women is one of the approach that we need to take forward. So thank you very much, and I'll take questions during the Q&A session. Asantini.
Thank you very much, Mr. Director, for enriching the conversation further by bringing in issues of private sector, the youth, women, how negotiations impact on greening the AFCFTA. So with all those presentations, I believe there are a lot of issues that have been raised. There are areas that we need clarity. And I believe this is just to further the debate and make the debate richer so that we are able to get a way forward on sustainable trade and how the AFCFTA can promote sustainable trade. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll now get into our Q&A session. Probably we have some questions from the chat. I don't know whether we have questions from the chat. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, we have some questions from the chat and some comments also. And it seems that people have noticed that there are a lot more ESG or sustainability provisions in the protocol on trade in services than there are in the protocol on trade in goods. So maybe if one of you has an idea why that may be the case, that would be interesting. And then the other thing that is noticeable in the chat is a certain degree of frustration because there seems to be no real provision on business accountability in the AFCFTA and its protocols. And the question came up why there cannot be a protocol on environment and responsible business conduct in the framework of the AFCFTA. And I think this is a question to all of you. And maybe especially Mr. Kalisa, would you support such a protocol? I think would be interesting to know.
Thank you. So the first question was, why do we have provisions for environment in the trade in services and not trade in goods? I think that is a very fundamental question. Could it be the nature of services protocols? Could it be the nature of trade in goods? Is it the issue of regulatory issues that need to be addressed in the services protocols? I don't know who will take that question. You want?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I think that's a very pertinent question in terms of the negotiation. Again, when you look at the first phase of the negotiation of the CFTA, it captured adequately trade in goods and trade in services. And when you look at the nature of the environment related issues, when you look at the SPS, when you look at the standards, when you look at TBTs, those are more infused in around the services. So the environment has been, I would say, regulatory heavier. That's why I think the negotiator realized that is important because the environmental issues are more regulatory in nature than they are in within the trade in goods. But again, the way not within also CFTA, even including the other protocol in terms of customs union and common market, you find environmental issues are treated around trade in services. More they feature more prominently in trade in services as opposed to trade in goods. Because again, some of the services like transport, I mentioned in my presentation, transport, logistics. These are most sectors that really have heavy impact on environment. When I was looking at the what we use in terms of trade, the maritime transport almost account for the bulk of the environmental related issues. So I think that is one of the qualification why the environmental issues are treated under trade in services. But having said that, I also appreciate that, and this has been a challenge across the entire region and across the continent. We've treated environmental issues as cross-cutting issues. In my view, I would want to have it as a standalone protocol. The way now we've embraced the protocol in e-commerce, we are fast-tracking the protocol on women in trade and youth. So environment, if we want to give it the due attention it deserves, we need to get it out, to isolate it from other protocols and treat it alone and give it the due attention it deserves, because it has a detrimental impact in terms of implementing the CFTA. Thank you very much.
Mr. Moderator.
Okay, sorry.
Yes, can I come in on this specific question, please? This is Desire Lomo.
Mr. Desire had some contribution to the first question.
Can I come in, please?
Go ahead.
Okay, so on this question of why do we have provision of on environment in services, not in goods? So as I say in my introductory remarks, you have to think about the AFCFTA as a whole. AFCFTA is part of the flagship of the AU. So it means that when you consider the greening aspect of the AFCFTA, take it as a whole. The AFCFTA is a trade agreement. That one must also be clear. And what a trade agreement do is just to, create a procedure so that a goods can be moved from a country to another. A services can be moved from a country to another. So in terms of goods particularly, the AFCFTA is not managing the production. It's not managing the production particularly, but it's managing how these products are moved from a country to another, developing SPS, TBT, developing rules of origin, and so on and so on. In that regard, it can't be understandable why it's not really focused on environmental issues. Yes, of course, when you produce, when you manufacture, you can insert in your process of production a requirement of environmental friendly production and so on and so on. You can do that. But in services, the perspective is a bit different, because there the services is developed and trade immediately. It's not like in goods. So this where you see that it's a bit technical when I just present it more generally as such, but you can do it more technically if time may allow us. These are one specific point that I wanted to raise. And then you will see in the upcoming protocol where rights are created, where rights are generated by the protocol, there you will see more environmental provision. But in the goods protocol, you just handle the goods as it is to move from a country to another. So this is a very important element I wanted to bring in. So, and then the last point that was made to say, do we need a single protocol on environmental or climate change issues in the AFCFTA? Let's think about the AFCFTA and the trade agreement. If you would like to have a separate protocol on environment, and this is the second time in a meeting that I hear this proposal, but what are you going to insert there which deals with trade? What are you trading there? Because we need to have provisions that are specific to trade, that are assisting trade. But can we separate the environmental provisions from the core protocol to which on which they should be? I say no. So for the time being, I don't think we need a separate protocol. It's a cross-cutting issue, and it is also handled in different elements of the African Union architecture. So I don't see the AFCFTA addressing everything, because developing a single continental market, yes, is the objective of the AFCFTA. Easing movement of goods, people, investment, and finance. That's the objective of the AFCFTA. In this regard, AFCFTA has to comply with the different other elements of the AU dealing with sustainability agenda. So that's how we can put it, to say, yes, we are interested to have a provision on environment, but we need to incorporate them in the current existing and the upcoming protocol, instead of having a separate protocol, which will be difficult to justify in terms of having it separate from the other protocol. I submit, Mr. Moderator.
Maybe you can contribute, then Dr. Onyango will have his input.
Thank you. No, just a quick addition and question maybe to what Desiree just mentioned. I'm wondering also a little bit about sort of expectation management. I mean, the AFCFTA is a trade agreement after all, and I mean, there's huge hopes. We hear all the time that it's a game changer, it's going to change so much. Rose was saying it has the potential to solve all the problems on the continent, and I'm wondering a little bit if both on the partner side, I mean, the countries negotiating the AFCFTA, but also us as partners, if we also have to be a bit careful, sort of how many expectations to create from that one trade agreement. After all, a trade agreement which can have a massive, of course, economic effect if it's implemented well, but then it also needs all kind of other policies, reforms around it. And the agreement as such can only do so much I think this is true for the environment. I'm also wondering a little bit about, I mean, the gender topic. Now there will be a protocol on women and youth. I will be very curious to see what's actually going to be in the protocol and what will be the effect of it, because I think many of the problems that we see in terms of gender, I don't know if they can be addressed actually through a protocol in a trade agreement, but maybe rather through other policies. So I'm just wondering if there is maybe a slight danger that we might lose sight of like everything else that needs to be done by only focusing on sort of having another protocol in.
Okay, Dr. Onyango had some quick contributions, then we go online.
Thank you, moderator. I'm Christopher Onyango. I'm Director for Trade and Customs. First of all, just to take the floor for the first time to appreciate the invitation by GIZ for COMESA Secretariat to participate in this event. We don't take it lightly, particularly the very important, topics of discussions. Let me go straight to thanking the presenters today, starting with Desiree, as well as our discussants, Rose and John, for very, illuminating presentations. I don't have a question as such, but I was really keen. The question that came as to why, there seems to be many provisions for environmental sustainability in the services protocol compared to the goods. And I want to say that I never thought of that question, before it was asked here. But just to say that it is not necessarily the case, because I think, as explained by Desiree, we need to treat this agreement as one. So in most cases, you don't need to separate. We tend to treat them separately, the services from the goods, but they have to be, taken together concurrently for actually trade to take place. And that is why you find there may be provisions in the services, yes, but they affect production, which is what generates what is actually traded across. So if you look at the production process, there are a lot of inputs, services that go into production, and some of those provisions are therefore meant to ensure that there is sustainability of environment. And some of those laws, as already mentioned, also are national. They're already laws that we have at the national level, particularly to enforce quality production and many other environmental related issues. And so that's the input I wanted to put, that it is not necessarily that you want to treat these protocols and many others separately. In fact, one of the protocols which is also being developed at the moment, negotiated, is the one on competition policy, which is again also cross-cutting, and which helps or will ensure that in both goods and services, there is a fair trading practices, as well as protection of consumers and the environment as a whole. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I think we'll go to the last question, which is online. I believe it was from Mr. Seidu. Okay. So, Mr. Seidu, you have the floor, and then I think we'll wrap up this session. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I think mine is not a question per se, but it's just a brief 3-point comment that I want to make to the discussion. Very, very important and interesting discussion that is going on. Yes, I would like to support Desiree's point that we should make the AFCFTA stand out clearly as a trade agreement and avoid a scope creep, that we expand the scope maybe to the point where it may not be sustainable to manage as an agreement. But I would like to make this the suggestion that the AFCFTA negotiators and framers should make a very clear link to other existing frameworks or other existing laws, negotiations, or agreements that are environment and climate change related, so that it is not only in preambular commitments or indirect commitment, but it should be very, very clear. I think we're discussing the topic about how to green the AFCFTA. And so I will connect with Rose's comment that we can start with the national implementation strategies. We don't necessarily need to green the AFCFTA through the AFCFTA's agreement directly, but we can begin the process through the national implementation strategies that UNECA or GIZ is supporting in various countries. The last point I'll make is that I also want to recommend that we learn from the Asia Pacific region, which from those of you who are involved in the WTO discussions, did come up with some 54 environmental goods that have become more like the basis for most multilateral environmental agreements or discussions, to see how within Africa we can promote the trade of these goods. And again, I like to make the point is about trade. So let's look at one, what are these products that are of concern to Africa? We have several environmental issues or environmental needs in agric, in renewable energy, in environmental services or environment, construction, several of these, waste management, for example, recycling. These are all sectors that Africa has specific needs in. Are there specific products that we can reduce tariffs on, we can make rules of origin on, that these products can be manufactured in Africa, can be assembled in Africa, so that through the AFCFTA rules of origin, the existing protocols, we can enhance or promote trade in these goods. These are, for me, the approach I'll recommend. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Seidu. I think we can take one more question, burning question from the physical participants, and then we move on to the next session. Any question?
I think latter part of the discussion, the issue of funding for green initiatives came up. I am of the view that in the past couple of years, maybe decades, there has been quite substantial amount of funding from international development organizations, donor agencies. What I see to be a challenge is also the lack of a concerted effort in the implementation of the projects that this funding supports. So there are little bits of projects here and there, all funded through this means. And because they are so disjointed, the impact of the projects then are watered down. Is there a way then for us to ensure that maybe there's a way to probably bundle projects together so that it makes a lot more impact than the silo projects we do in small corners here and there, which then is not an efficient use of the funding that we receive, which is not perpetual.
Okay, thank you. There's a question that was unanswered on gender. Maybe Madam Rose, you want to respond?
Thank you. Before I respond to that, I am really happy you raised the issue of lack of coordination within the space of implementation of the CFT and generally implementation of development projects in Africa. And I think my proposal would be to have some sort of a donor roundtable, the way we have one at the WTO. And I have worked in government of Kenya specifically, and you find that several donors are funding, similar projects, and you find that government officials will still take, that funding despite it having, been implemented by another development partner. So I think some form of coordination amongst partners who are providing support, maybe specifically for the CFTA, to know that maybe even to select to say, I'm going to fund, implementation strategies. Somebody else is going to fund maybe certain sectors. So that kind of coordination needs to be there, as opposed to competition, whereby everybody is rushing to do an MOU with the CFTA secretariat. Everybody is rushing to fix something. That way it becomes very counterproductive. All that basket that we are putting together is not working for Africa. But if we can be able to have a coordinated effort, then we'll be able to achieve much more if we were to work separately. I also want to talk about the comment that he made about gender and why it's important that gender is included as a protocol, and we have successfully, lobbied to have it included. I am of the point of view that not everything needs to be a protocol in the CFTA, but issues that have historically or been a challenge in the African continent. And one of the biggest issues is the gender disparities that are there. Women contribute and youth contribute a really, really big population of the economies in Africa. And policies and agreements are not gender neutral. You find that a lot of them are not created or negotiated or are crafted with both sexes in mind. And for example, the CFTA, if you look at it, prior to having the protocol, we just had one, I think a line mentioned there to say that, it's going to be inclusive. And gone are the days whereby we have a paragraph within a whole document to say that, and this will be implemented in an inclusive way. We need to be able to legislate, to direct, because we cannot assume that countries know what it means to be able to be gender inclusive. And that it's happening. I think the CFTA Secretariat has been doing consultations with regional economic communities, with countries, different partner states, to be able to find out what are the issues. For example, the simplified trade regime that takes care of the informal cross-border traders in most of the African borders, who women form around 75% of. That was not in the initial protocol or in the initial articles of the CFTA, but now we are proposing to have that. So I just wanted to make that clarification. Yes, maybe in another continent it would not be important because those inequalities are not there, but in Africa we are still far, and it's important to have it.
Thank you very much. I think we'll take one last comment so that we wrap up, because we need to move on to the next session. I think, David, you had a Seba.
No, sorry, just very, very brief one on the coordination that you also just mentioned. I mean, fully agreed, but maybe now here speaking as actually GIZ also, and also GIZ supporting the AFCFTA, I just want to mention that this is actually happening. I mean, to a certain extent, of course, as much as like all the different partners are also willing to contribute. But there is, for example, the so-called AU Trade Partners Group, which are all the partners supporting formerly the AU and now also the AFCFTA Secretariat in the context of the AFCFTA and trade. And there are some other formats. I mean, it's not that this is not happening. I fully agree that still, I mean, there's definitely room and need for more and better coordination, but it is something that I think many of the partners also have in mind, because obviously it's also not our interest to duplicate efforts which whatever the EU or the US or like ECA or someone else is doing. Yeah, the question is a little bit who could take over that role? Would it be the AFCFTA Secretariat itself kind of coordinating? Do they have the capacities? Ideally, yes, but yeah, but anyway, I think it's something that is happening, but should be improved.
Just to add to that, again, this is an important, and I even raised it, that coordination is very important. It is a very paramount from the CFTA Secretariat, and I think they have that role and responsibility to coordinate the RECs, regional economic communities, and also coordinate the actors involved, the private sector, the civil society, as well as our government, and also the donors in terms of the resources that are required in terms of driving the aspiration of the CFTA. I think that coordination framework is there from the African Union and also from the CFTA Secretariat. So I think we need to align that also from the regional integration level at the AAC level. Next week we'll be hosting all other RECs on the CFTA matters from 6th to 7th to see how we harmonize our positions, how we take into consideration those instruments, the tariff concession, the rules of origin, the customs cooperation, the TBTs. That is very critical, and I think it is happening. Just what is important, just to share information across the region, across the board. That is very critical. I wanted also to add to what my sister Rose mentioned on the, a number of studies, both from UNCTAD, from World Bank, have indicated that the trade agreement, the trade policy tend to be gender blind, and they are not taking into consideration the gender element. So that's why the protocol, and I want to appreciate the CFTA Secretariat, they are now even fast tracking that protocol in terms of women trade, giving them prominence. And again, from the World Bank study, they said the most beneficiary of this CFTA will be women and youth. That's why those protocols are very important to safeguard their interests, their needs and aspirations. I think that is very critical. And I think I also appreciate the speaker who talked about environmental goods. That is very critical in terms of, because currently we export some of our products to the developed market, and it is a requirement that these goods must have that environmental component within those goods. So I think it is important that we discuss and dialogue on those issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are 45 minutes behind schedule, so we'll cut it for now. We have to go to the second session, which will be looking at country-level perspectives from Ghana, Kenya, and also the EAC. So we'll take our first presentation from Dr. Eric Chum. Dr. Eric Chum is the CEO.
Good afternoon and good morning,
Dr. Eric.
Ghana.
Dr. Eric.
Yeah,
Dr. Eric.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes. Just a minute. Let us give a round of appreciation for the panelists who are here. Yes, now, Dr. Eric, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon to those in Kenya, and good morning to those in Ghana and other parts of the world. Earlier speakers have actually made some very important submissions, which I'm not going to repeat in my presentation. I will focus basically on the challenges and opportunities of sustainable free trade in Africa. Please, next slide. That's the outline. Next one, please. Yes, this we already know about the African continent, free trade, and or that. Next slide, please. So this we all know about after, and so there's no need repeating that, but just for purpose of studying. The next slide, please. Yes. On the focus of trade and environment, there be submissions on whether to have a separate protocol that basically deals on issues of environment or climate change. It's integrated into the whole discussion because Africa, as we know, depends on its natural resources that are equally contributors or affected by the environment. Agriculture, fisheries, forestry, mining sector, just to mention a few. It's so important that these trade agreements seek increased trade and enhance economic growth, and also ensure that we do not accelerate or contribute to the effect of climate change because of our dependence on natural resources for subsistence. Next slide, please. So we need to create economies of scale and ensure that there's a technical know-how to be able to manage our resources effectively. We need to accelerate the development of sustainable technologies, which is very important. Enhance intra-Africa trade. Other things we need to be looking at in terms of greening our after and sort of challenges will be how do we lower trade barriers that exist. I'll like to us to focus on how we could reduce the environmental footprints of most of the practices and the trade that comes in. What has happened in the past is that programs and projects insist on particular protocols or particular clauses within agreements that come in. For instance, on the equator principle, that indicates that projects and programs that are over $10 million needs to have an environmental impact assessment done for such projects. And this is something that could be incorporated into programs and protocols and trade agreements that after really want to pursue. Next slide, please. So they are all interrelated. If you're talking about sustainable development, which have been mentioned today over and over again, we need to be able to incorporate issues about economy, about our society, our environment into a single protocol or single program that addresses all the concerns that are raised by various actors to address issues of sustainable development. We cannot just have clauses within agreements or within that basically talk about the environment, but highly integrated into the whole programs, agreements, and contracts that after really get involved with. Next slide, please. Next one, please. So what are challenges and opportunities that we have currently? Currently, AFTA does not have current feature on protocol environment, which we already know. The effective implementation of multilateral environmental agreements and recognizing a party's right to adopt measures are necessary for the environment. Equally important is the enforcement of environmental laws and standards that really addresses issues of environment in protocols and agreements that come in. Technology advancements, it will be also very important to focus on illegal trade that threaten endangered species. That currently is a big issue within the African context. Of course, we cannot also forget the impact of COVID-19 and how we need to develop programs and policies that address this impact. Next slide. Other challenges in areas of tax. Next slide, please. There's an element of costs that's associated in new infrastructure, regulations, and innovation that really matters. What we need to do as a continent is to focus on how we can decarbonize the after in various sectors. Although most countries depend on natural resources for subsistence, there also has to be an upward trajectory on decarbonization within the African region.
Hello,
Next,
Dr. Chum.
please. Yes.
Can you please skip to the Ghana perspective?
Okay, that's fine.
Yes.
So in terms of opportunities, sorry, before the slide before this, what we are looking at for is that in Ghana, what has been done is that Ghana has updated its nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. That was submitted at the last COP26 in Glasgow from 2020 to 2023. It gives everyone the perspective of what the country wants to focus on to address climate change mitigation and adaptation, and more especially impact on vulnerable persons. Other policy programs that have been designed include green job strategies that have been worked on, green economy agenda that addresses what the country intends doing. The policy environment is being developed to ensure that things that are done have a basis in law, sometimes even ascended by the presidency and approved by parliament, to ensure that we're able to go green, and green programs that could be expanded over the period. Similar programs within the TVET sector, they focuses on building the capacity of MSMEs on what needs to be done, because MSC will contribute to 90% of an informal sector. And when this informality is addressed, because they are not really organized, or their contributions are probably recognized, it's something that provides an opportunity to ensure that trade is within the country is green and addresses issues of concern like capacity needs, technology needs, and all that. Next slide, please. And the next one. So Ghana is focused on what we call the green project, that they are looking at planting over 20 million trees by the 6th and 7th of June, as a program that looks at how we could green our economy. There are efforts on digitalization, reducing the use of paper, for instance, within the economy. All these are meant to ensure that policies that are already designed are implemented. And that is where most of the challenges. We have policies, but they are not being implemented. But now efforts are concentrated on addressing these policies that have been properly written and approved even by the highest authority of the land. And with that implementation, it's expected that Ghana will be a flag bearer in terms of greening our policies and addressing issues of environment and climate change. Next slide, please. Other policies within the energy sector, including the of electric vehicles. This has been identified because the European Union, the Americans are telling us that by 2030, most vehicles will be using much more of electric rather than petrol and diesel. And so what opportunities does this present for the economy? How can businessmen trade within this sector be improved? There's a challenge by providing opportunity as the country gets into industrialization. What needs to be done to improve our economy using green principles that guides some of these things? And again, these are all within the policy framework that have been designed. Next slide, please.
Dr. Chum, kindly conclude in 1 minute. Thank you.
Okay. The other thing of importance is issue about circular economy and next slide, please. The next slide. Okay, no, before this, there's a need to promote practices such as corporate social responsibility. I talked about the environmental impact assessment earlier. Equally important is the strategic environmental assessment that addresses issues about policy, planning, and programs that need to be green to ensure that programs are green and they provide issues that address this issue of climate change. Carbon trading among parties is something that the country is really looking into, or how we can quantify a carbon and trade as part of the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Equally important is on trade in natural resources, illegal threatened species that I mentioned earlier, and to deliver productive growth and boost innovation and entrepreneurship through technological transformation that's currently ongoing in the country. So there is an opportunity to make things right in the country, and I think the policymakers, MSA, business people are given the enabling environment to ensure that the country is on the trajectory of decarbonization and then reduce our environmental footprint. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Eric. A round of applause. Now, I'll take this opportunity to introduce the panelists who are here with us physically. We have Mr. Abel Kamau, Kenya Association of Manufacturers. He's the Trade and Policy Manager. And above that, he's an engineer turned trade specialist. And then we have Mr. Mensa, who's a technical advisor of the Special Initiative on Training and Job Creation at GIZ Ghana. A round of applause, please. So, yes. Okay. Thank you. So we also have our ESC presenter who is online. He's not here with us physically. Mr. Ladislas. Hope I've pronounced it correctly. Mr. Ladislas, I hope I've pronounced your name correctly.
Yes. Good afternoon, all.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the forum. Despite being with us online, I believe your contributions will still be very critical in this forum. So we'll start with the presentation from Mr. David. Yes, Mr. David, welcome.
Thank you. I hear we are out of time, so I'll run through this quickly as much as I can. This is just a practical example of what we're doing in Ghana in relation to circular economy and greening. So next slide. Yes. So we have a bigger project which is called the Circular Economy for Africa project. And under this project, we have developed this Ghana Goes Green project, which is currently being implemented. Next slide, please. So this project basically looks at 3 thematic areas: plastic paper recycling, which is one, plastic paper and textile recycling, e-waste and automobile, waste, water, and water management as well as another thematic area. Now, these key areas have been selected based on the current needs in the Ghanaian economy when it comes to the issues of circular economy. Currently, what has been done is a project which is under the plastics part of this grand project. And this project has started with 2 key partners. One is a Ghanaian company called Repattern, which basically aggregates plastics that are collected in Ghana. Unfortunately for us in Ghana, plastics are not banned or reduced like you have in Kenya and in Rwanda. So we have a lot of plastics. All this you see here is tons and tons of plastic. So this is collected from the economy build, as you can see here, and then is exported to be used again to manufacture some other kind of plastic. And so this project has just to ensure that we are able to deal with this problem internally as a country rather than exporting it. There is also a waste and automobile section that we are currently developing. Ghana currently is industrializing, and there's an influx of
car assembling plants in the country. Of trying to find green energy to power these e-vehicles. Because, I mean, what is the point of having e-vehicles if you're going to use fossil fuel to power them again? It really doesn't work. To use fossil fuel, we're trying to reduce our carbon imprints and deal with climate change. So that's also another consideration we are making. And then water management is also another thing that we're looking at. Ghana as a country is covered by about 40% water. And yet still, we still have a lot of challenges with rain patterns. So now irrigation is becoming a thing that needs to be considered. How do we deal with that, considering the context in which we are as a country? That is something that we're looking at to do with the water and wastewater management angle of this project. Could you please move? Oh, sorry. So, go. So the business case for this project, so Veolia, which is a French company, is looking at setting up a bottling-to-bottling company in Ghana. But for them to be able to do that, they need to ensure that it makes business sense for them to do that. They need a certain threshold of recyclable plastics for them to be able to set up to make business sense for them. And that's about 600 tons of recycled plastics in a month. You can imagine how many rooms this size that amount of plastic is going to fill. And currently, we have been able to take out of the system at a month about 500 tons of plastic. That's every month. And that's where we are now. The challenge posed is not an easy one. We're just trying to see how best we can help with that. And like I said in my question earlier, one of the challenges we have is that the efforts in the space is so disjointed. So then the impact that we seek to achieve is it doesn't come the way we expect it to be, because there's a small project in one corner there, there's another project there. That's is actually another challenge that needs to be addressed. And we are trying to use this project as one of the means to address that challenge by bringing on board other donor agencies, other international organizations, other private partner players that are interested to deal with this in the country as well. And then once all of this is done, it would lead to more green jobs in the Ghanaian economy, which is something that is currently being pushed a lot. I think Sadie was in the virtual participant list. He is part of the people that designed the Ghana Green Jobs strategy together with GIZ, so he could probably speak a lot more to that. So what we have done is to ensure that there's efficiency at collection, which is the base level. There's efficiency at processing level as well, just so that we address the bottlenecks in the value chain of the plastic recycling system. And this project is going to be the blueprint for which will be designed for the other key projects that I mentioned initially. So we're using this as a pilot more to extend into other areas in the Ghanaian economy as well, dealing with plastics. Yes, I think that's good. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that precise presentation. Now we'll move on to our next presenter, Mr. Abel Kamau, Trade and Policy Manager, Kenya Association of Manufacturers. He will address the issue of green production and sustainable trade. Welcome, Mr. Abel.
Yeah, thank you, Manasseh, and my regards to GIZ for organizing this event. So my name is Abel Kamau. Yeah. So my name is Abel Kamau, the Trade Policy Manager within the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. Just as an introduction, we are a business membership organization focusing on the value addition industry. So our members are mainly players within the manufacturing industry, and we have 14 sectors of them, which represent different value chains where manufacturers are existing in. So maybe I'll give an insight into green manufacturing and sustainable trade, and link these with ACFT and possibly how we could scale up sustainability within the context. So maybe in line with the green manufacturing, I think some of the colleagues and panelists who've been before have been talking about the likes of circular economy, green production and such like. And maybe giving an insight into maybe what the Kenya Association of Manufacturers is doing, and basically our outlook into ACFT and how we like envision sustainable trade growing and scaling up within the continent. I think one of the key areas that is currently being emphasized on, both in Kenya, within the regional economic blocks, within the East African Community, COMESA, and also by extension in the countries that we are trading with, globally in the economic partnership agreements, and also within AGOA is circular economy. And this basically looks at ensuring that we are able to maintain the raw materials and the products in meaningful economic value before releasing them back to the environment. And in line with this, we've been able to work with the plastic sector. I think one of the key areas which have been under focus globally is the plastic sector. And we've driven voluntary engagement and voluntary compliance. And within this element of circular economy, we've been able to work with the plastic sector and developed the Kenya Extended Producer Responsibility Organization. So one of the areas which is which we can confidently say that we've been able to drive sustainable trade around is on plastic. And basically what the Kenya Extended Producer Responsibility Organization looks at is ensuring that manufacturers and traders have a net zero-sum effect on their plastic footprint on the economy. And we've been able to work with the EABC, with the Uganda Manufacturers Association, with the Rwandese Manufacturers Association, and also with Tanzania to create good learnings on how we can be able to scale up these. In line with this is also the element of clean production, where we've been taking part for the past 20 years. And at KAM, we do host the Center for Green Growth and Climate Change. And one of some of the key areas which the center does is ensuring that we have resource efficiencies within our manufacturers. So the elements with regard to energy efficiency, resource efficiency, and the use of renewables has been scaled up due to this Center for Energy Efficiency and Green Growth. And also due to the strategies that we've had in engaging with the relevant ministries, departments, and agencies. So one of the key things that we've learned from this is ensuring that we have a compliance mechanism and a reporting mechanism for private sector to be able to report on the interventions around sustainability. And by this, I think I would extend an invitation to all of us to the Energy Management Awards. It usually happens every year. Initially, it started as an energy management award, but slowly it has grown into other resources, including wastewater, air quality, and also waste management right now. The other key things that we are looking at is decent work. I think we can't talk about sustainability without ensuring that people have a decent source of income and are able to get meaningful engagement, employment engagement within the manufacturing sector and also within the trade element. Another key element is traceability, specifically coming out with regard to food security and food safety. It's another key area that we're looking at within the concept of sustainability. By and large, looking at areas with regard to ESGs, environmental, social and governance elements, which I think the private sector has been at the forefront on driving voluntary compliance. Can go to the next slide there. So when we look at sustainable trade, it's trade that upholds the element of sustainability, included but not limited to environmental, ensuring that clean production is happening and conservation of the environment is happening, and by extension that the economic activities driving that trade do not harm the environment at large. Also, with regard to sustainability, social, ensuring that the societies are gaining meaningful benefits from the engagements in that trade, and areas such as the use of child labor, the inclusivity, gender inclusivity in employment, discrimination and absorption of people with disabilities in meaningful employment, and also issues such as slave labor are captured within these social elements. Then lastly, on governance, ensuring that these companies and people and companies that are engaging in manufacturing and trade put in place governance mechanisms that are able to position them to be able to uphold the key elements of sustainability and sustain business ethics. So one of the other key networks that we do host within the association, which is also a learning from Kenya, is the United Nations Global Compact, which looks at mainstreaming the ethical ways of doing business in the private sector, and specifically for the manufacturing sector. So we've been able to onboard manufacturers and players both in domestic and international trade into this platform. And this has really been able to enable us to push sustainability. Then on the second element is what we really need to ensure that we are able to scale up sustainable trade, is to first of all have a set of requirements. And by extension, I think the session today earlier on was talking about protocols and the need for standards around some of the areas that we are talking about. So standards around environmental compliance and what would we deem as a sustainable trade, and what would a product or a service must have met to be able to be deemed as one that is sustainable enough. Then the second point is a need for mainstreaming support to business organizations. I think one key thing which we've learned from it is that voluntary compliance and voluntary sustainability enhancement has really been a key driver, not just in Africa, not just in Kenya, but also in the West and also in Europe. And for some of the manufacturers and business players that are already exporting to the European Union, I think there are so many standards and compliances which are buyer-driven, which underscores the importance of having those voluntary support and mainstreaming for businesses. We can go to the next slide. So within ACFTA, I think maybe just to underscore maybe why maybe the climate change and also maybe environmental sustainability is not part of the ACFTA text. I think ACFTA is part of the African Union's Agenda 2063. So ACFTA is just a part of Agenda 2063. And if you look at the other key agendas within Agenda 2063 of the African Union, the element of environmental sustainability comes out strongly. So I think what we really need is to ensure that we have a mechanism of linking Agenda 2063, the elements of sustainability within it with ACFTA. And I think that is where maybe mostly the private sector needs to work closely with the public sector and also with the development agencies to be able to push this and create that linkage. Then secondly, I would like to underscore that Africa is mainly playing on the raw material part with regard to most of the global value chains that we are playing on. So meaning that there is minimal value addition which is happening within the continent. And if you marry that with the last point where we are just trading at a rate of 15% with regard to intra-African trade, it gives us with a huge opportunity of creating a sustainable economy, both in production and also in trade element. Can go to the last one, just to be economical with time. So maybe the key way forward and maybe what we look forward to is to mainstream voluntary compliance and adoption of sustainability standards at the private sector level. I think the good examples which have been given from Ghana and also what's happening within Kenya is a good place maybe where other African countries can possibly learn from. And we'll be maybe extending maybe our invite to the Energy Management Awards, which gives a sneak view into how Kenya has been able to do that. Then create a platform for benchmarking and assessment of compliance. So companies and private players in the private sector enterprises need to learn from each other. And peer-to-peer learning has been one of the key things that has enabled our manufacturers to be able to adopt sustainability. Then lastly, develop capacities in private and public sectors to drive sustainable industrialization and trade. One of the key areas which I think is missing in Kenya and also by extension the rest of Africa is a compliance standard with regard to sustainability. I think we have many manufacturers and producers within Africa that are already exporting to the EU and also to the US, and they are really complying on the compliance requirements on the buyer market, and they have various standards that they are complying to, but we don't have a replica of that in Africa. So I think if we are able also to push for the adoption of compliance standards, which will drive voluntary compliance, that would be really a plus for us. So with that, thank you very much, and looking forward to the deliberations later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abel, David, for your presentations. In the interest of time, we'll move on to the last final presenter, Mr. Leonidas. And just for your information, we've go away with Part C, which was on the way forward. We'll leave it as food for thought, which will be discussed at a later stage. For now, we'll finalize with the last presenter, Mr. Leonidas, and then we go for a brief Q&A so that we are within time for the afternoon session and lunch. So I'd like to welcome you, Mr. Leonidas. He's the head of Environment and Natural Resources, ESC. Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Leonidas.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Can you confirm?
Yes, 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 yes.
Okay, that's very good. And let me thank you for inviting the ESC to be part of this discussion. And we congratulate for the convening this important agenda on the trade. And for us, we are very, very interested to the climate change issues and the sustainable development. So I know you have a short time. Maybe you can go to the next slide, of which yes, as you are aware that as ESC, we're implementing the integration agenda, and we have the 4 pillars. But the common market is the most important for us now for this discussion. And we're at Article 40 of the common market, we are addressing the issue of the environment and the natural resources, of course, including the climate change. So for us, we are really looking forward to accelerate the economy here in the region, and while ensuring that the environment and natural resources is not degraded. And the climate change for us is key, and you will see that as a region, we are the most vulnerable. So the common market for us is a very key instrument that we are integrating. You can go for the next slide to try to highlight. Okay. Now you see that the climate change now in the region, as I said, for us is very key. So while we are moving on the trade related matters, we know that first of all, under the Paris Agreement or the partner states, we are participating to the implementation so as to limit the temperature to 1.2 degrees centigrade increase. And we have the national determined contribution, the NDCs, where we have agreed that all the countries how we are participating to, as a global goal, to address the challenge of climate change. We still know that the public has a low awareness of which we need to enhance. So the trading matters now comes in as to take into account that we have to ensure that all the business related, they are taking into account that the climate change is a threat in the region. And if we not address, then it will affect our business into the region. So in that case, the issue of the policies, the strategies, having the interventions on the ground for us is very, very key. And we still need to mobilize more resources as pertained in the Paris Agreement agenda so as to ensure that we address the challenges of the climate change to the communities. In particular, like you see the next slide, please. Particularly, you see that we have the issue of the flooding, the issue of the droughts, and you see as we are trying that the region has more impact to the climate change. In this regard, we are vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. Then when we say about the trade and sustainable development, then we know that the climate change will still be the threat to the agenda, like the issue of the water availability, like the issue of the diseases, infrastructure, threats, all this one, we are really, really vulnerable. So we will look like that we have to prioritize the key issues that we believe as a war in the East African region, we can address on. Can you go to the next slide? Yes. In that case, then we have said it that we have to focus on the priority areas, of which now, when we say trade, we believe that they will support us to integrate the agenda on climate change. And one of the areas that we are really looking forward is on the first of all, let me say that while adaptation will remain the priority for the region, mitigation actions is key because to reduce the problem to the climate change. Because we know if we, for instance, say the region is potential, we are saying now trade, the region is potential for the renewable energy like the solar, the windy, the geothermal, the hydro. So all these ones that in the context of we can take the opportunity of the climate change and the challenges to invest in the renewable energies. This is one of the areas that the region is potential, and really for us, we are looking forward to focus on this area. As I said, we really need to mobilize more resources, and the Paris Agreement, Article 9 is on the financing mechanisms. We, as a region, we are putting more efforts to ensure that the programs and the projects on climate change will involve all the stakeholders, including the private sector. So I think this is a good opportunity to collaborate with the partners, and I think JZ for convening such type of the meeting where we can discuss with the stakeholders. I heard the previous speakers in the first panel. Of course, we have the instruments here. We have the climate change policy, the 2011 adopted endorsed by the heads of state. We have the climate change master plan 20 years, 2011 to 2031. And we have the strategy on climate change, of which now this one has prioritized on both adaptation and mitigation actions, of which we are implementing. And of course, we at institutional level, we have the Council of the Ministers has institutionalized to have the climate change technical group, where we have the countries' expertise meeting to provide guidance on climate change to the region. But I must admit, but after 2015, we came out with a roadmap to implement the Paris Agreement. And one of the areas is to institutionalize, but also the capacity building to ensure that we come out with a projects and program of which we ensure that now the framework on climate change is being implemented in the region. For us, is very, very key, and that's the achievement I can say that we have achieved, and we have the projects and the programs being implemented. But most important is on the next slide. Okay, thank you very much. Where we have agreed that, you see, we are mentioning that we need to mainstream climate change activities and trading. We need to ensure that the communities are supported to reduce the vulnerability to the impacts of climate change. But the one number 5 we're mentioning that as a region, we have agreed that let's come out with a climate change law to provide the legal backup to address the challenge of climate change into the region. And this one, we started the process, and we are under resource mobilization to support the development of this policy, of this bill, of which now the head of state will assent it, and we are optimistic that if we get funding, we can have this law and then support all the countries to address the challenge of climate change. We know that some partner states, for instance, Kenya has already the law quite a long time, but other countries have not adopted the laws. So the regional one, we streamline or we try to guide the legal aspects of climate change to come out with a clear guidance on how we are addressing this one. This is for us is very, very key. But I must say that we in terms of the stakeholders engagement, we have the Secretary General Forum, which meet annually on private sector, the COCOs, and the interested groups to discuss and agree sustainable development. And one of the presentations, of course, focus on the sustainable development goals. And the 17 is a partnership. For us also, we are looking very forward to enhance the partnership in this regard. But we learned also that we need to come out with the climate change finance mobilization strategy, of which on 20th May, the ministers adopted the strategy, and now we are going to see implementation, and where we have said it one of the areas that will engage all the stakeholders to implement. This is the one the area that we are focusing on. Now, where we want to go is that as a region, we have said that you see the climate change is affecting all the sectors, all the stakeholders, all the landscapes. We are going to have more focus on the interventions on the ground where the communities will have more benefits. The restoration of the landscapes which are being degraded, for us, is very, very key. Protection of the environment due to the energy development for us is very, very key. And this one is to mobilize resources to ensure that we have the ground on the activities of the ground. But most important, the transformative and resilience food systems, the issue like the climate smart agriculture, where like the promotion of the irrigation schemes, promotion of the water harvesting mechanisms, the water pumping systems to the small-scale farmers, for us is very, very key, because this is the area that we understand that we are. Please, can you go back to the yes, where we want to ensure that we will have more impact on the ground, and as we have agreed already, that means the council as a region we have agreed that. The issue of the renewable energy and energy efficiency, agriculture and food security, and the issue of the water resources will be the focus, so as to improve the livelihood and strengthen the resilience of the communities to adapt to the impacts of climate change, but also taking the mitigation actions while we are achieving our sustainable development is very, very key. Let me mention that we have as I mentioned, that our policy on climate change, starting in the master plan, they were adopted before the Paris Agreement. So we are also looking for the review of this instrument, so as to ensure that they implement the national determined contributions. And we understand also that the mountain ecosystems is also the area that is being affected. This area has been lagging behind. So we are in discussion. We have established the collaboration with the UNEP, UN Environment, to ensure that we sustain our mountain ecosystem. So for the next 10 years as well, we are going to focus on the adaptation to the mountain ecosystems, so as to reduce the impacts of climate change. This is what we've decided to have more discussions And I think because of the time, I will stop here, and for any questions, of course, the Q&A, we'll also participate to provide more clarification. I thank you, moderator, and this is the thinking of the community for the next 10 years.
Thank you very much for your presentation. A round of applause. Okay, because we are already 8 minutes behind time, I will allow 3 precise questions. Just go straight to the point, and then the panelists will be able to take up your question. Any question from the floor and virtually?
Yeah, no, I asked questions before, but I actually have one question I'm interested in to hear from the Kenya Manufacturing Association, and maybe also from EABC. I don't know, because you mentioned the importance of private and voluntary standards, which, I mean, we know have been effective, as you said, also in many other regions. But then there's always this kind of danger of not having a level playing field, and those that sort of abide by higher standards are actually in sort of unfair competition with those that don't abide to these standards. So I'm wondering what your position or your organization's position is actually to having such voluntary standards transferred into actual like legal standards for all the companies in order to have a level playing field rather than sort of having these loopholes for different companies. Thank you.
Let's get that response, then we'll go to the second question.
Okay, maybe just to respond to that, I think I do agree with you. Initially, I think the voluntary, private sector-driven standards help create the necessary awareness. So in instances where maybe sustainability is maybe not, the awareness around sustainability is not widely spread, voluntary standardization enables to create that much needed awareness. Then secondly, it creates a business model because I think at the end of the year, I think companies are looking at their bottom lines. So the voluntary compliance standards create a business model where sustainability can be integrated in it without harming the bottom line in the longer run. So I think in the long term, these voluntary standards need to be integrated into more legal standards. Maybe just a case in point as an example is within Kenya right now, we do have the solid waste management policy and also the extended producer responsibility. Some years back within the association, we started these voluntary compliances around this subject. But about 3 months ago, it's now in law, and companies have a legal obligation to be part of this standardization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abel. Next question.
Thank you. Mine goes to Leonidas from the ESC and also John Kalisa. The ESC initially, through the private sector, tabled the plastic bill through the East African Legislative Assembly. Now, looking at the practical point of view, we see Uganda, we see Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda implementing practically the plastic management practically. However, we still see Uganda using the plastic, the buveras, as a usual baggage for carrying goods into the market. So I would like to know what is the process of this bill, and has it seen the light through the legislative processes? Any hope? And how do we ensure that this gets implemented as the waste is getting serious and we see the ocean getting flooded? Thank you.
So that question is directed to Mr. Leonidas, I believe. Yeah. Mr. Leonidas, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And yes, that's to clarify, is the polyethylene control bill, the 2017. We are to the assent process where we are waiting for the countries to assent to the bill. And she's very, very right that this is a very important bill. And last 20th, of course, let me mention, with the ministers also met to discuss among issues, including the polyethylene control or the plastic control in the region. And all the countries have been requested to enforce the laws, because all the countries have the laws, but what is the challenge is on the enforcement. So they have been irritated to enforce the laws on the management of the plastics. So that's what I can provide clarification, that we are under the assent process for this bill. Thank you.
Last question.
Thank you, moderator, presenters and speakers. Thank you. I think this has been very insightful and helpful. Yeah, it's been very insightful and helpful. To the Ghana team, I just wanted to ask if along the way you have made any challenges with regards to your project, because I think for us we also had something that we are doing in Malawi, but we're facing a bit of a challenge when it comes to the implementation side. With regards to our partners, I think it's something that we are facing a challenge with regards to the cooperation format. So I don't know how you managed to go about it, and maybe if you can share some of the challenges that you made and actually what has worked quite well in your scenario. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think what probably worked for us is looking at it sectorally instead of just looking at the partners. So for example, the plastic project I mentioned, the key partner is a private company, which is Reparton, but the project did not only target that key partner, because the activities of the key partner is just a certain portion of the chain. You need to get probably the buy-in of as many people along the value chain as possible to get it to work. Because if the support goes to just the key partner, who sits probably atop of the chain, there has to be some willingness from the other people that feed that key partner for the project to be able to succeed. So we targeted the key partner and did some other interventions for the other actors along the value chain that fed into the entire project. And then when it comes to the cooperation instrument, I don't know what project you're working on, but for the special initiative, we are fortunate to have a little flexibility when it comes to cooperating instruments. And so for this particular one, there was a local subsidy to the Ghanaian company, and then service agreements for the other players along the value chain in terms of trainings, in terms of provision of PPEs, in terms of putting them together in a formalized associations structure, sort of. So depending on what project, then you could look at which cooperating instrument works. But for us as a special initiative, we have a little flexibility when it comes to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if there's another burning question. I know you are willing to stay here for longer so that we address these issues exhaustively, but I'm sorry, we need to close. I know some of you are disappointed that we are closing, but in the interest of time, we need to close. So, I'll take this opportunity to thank, first of all, the people who put this session together. Secondly, our able panelists. Thank you for enriching the debate and enlightening us on sustainability in trade. I believe it's now clearer to us what it means, and it's not just something we are saying, but there are actual practical issues to sustainability in trade. So, thank you very much. To the participants, thank you very much for staying the course. and asking questions that raise the level of debate on these issues. And we look forward to further debate on the issues that have been raised, and probably a way forward can be developed from the discussions that emanated herein. With that said, I'd like us to give a round of applause, first of all, to the organizers. Then to the panelists. And then to the participants. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, so I believe the next item is lunch. Yes. You can leave at your pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, so I would also like to add, thank you very much for joining our session and making it interactive.